I want to welcome you to this month's webinar for the membership of the National Chimney Sweep Guild. One of the most recurring issues that every business owner in America faces today is the matter of getting new team members on our team. And once we get those people, making sure that they meet our expectations. Because all too commonly, what we see is people are being hired and then they don't meet the expectations. But what we're seeing is there's a reason. And the reason traces back to the interviewing, the hiring, the assessing, the onboarding, the training, and the accountability. You've got to put together a system if you're going to be successful in these endeavors. And this is what this month's webinar is all about. So please continue and listen on as Brandy Biswell, Cheryl Eisenhower, and myself share with you a process, a system that can bring you a higher level of success. But in order to get there, you got to follow every step of the process. If you leave one out, guess what? The process will fail. We see it happen every single day. So welcome aboard. Look forward to you joining us this month.
And today, just like every time we broadcast, we hope we bring you a message and some answers to the problems that are occurring out here in the real world. Now, why do we know these are happening? Because as coaches, guess what? We get to hear the challenges of so many people and hearing what's going on in the real world. And this is what we keep hearing. And we not only hear it from our clients, we hear it on the news media, we see it in social media, and that is, my people are just not meeting our expectations. And a lot of times people are just simply throwing their hands up. I'm hearing of people saying, hey, I'm just going back to one truck. I can't deal with the pressure. I just want to do this. So, Cheryl, do you hear this issue a lot in your hiring side when people engage your services?
All day. That's number one thing. It's over and over, and it's not just one company. It's completely wide, and even not people I'm not hiring for. I get the same conversations.
Yes, we do. So, Brandy, what are you hearing in your world, and not only in the world of chimneys and fireplaces, but you work in other industries too. So, what are you hearing from your viewpoints?
I hear this in every industry. I think that that's what we have to remember. We're not unique or special in the chimney and fireplace industry. This is happening everywhere, but also I think you have to realize you got into business. This is what you signed up for. So now it's a matter of knowing how to handle it, how to control it, how to drive it.
Yeah, and as you know, a lot of times, and you look at it, and as we get older, we hear there's a lot of things in this world that are changing that are hard to accept. But if we're going to live in this world, and if you're going to operate a business, then you have to learn to deal with this challenge. And can it be a challenge? You better believe it. So we got a whole list of things we're going to go over in this episode of where we're seeing the issue. And the number one issue, I believe, is that starts this is what I'm going to call desperation hiring. We are so desperate to get a human body that can hopefully walk and talk and speak that we'll hire anybody when we drop the ball. And this is part of the problem in that of what we're going through here. So, Brandy, what's your thought? Are we seeing desperation hiring? Is that part of the problem?
It's been an ongoing problem. I think though right now, I don't know that we're seeing it more. I think what's happening is I think the talent pool that's out there is not as great as it has been in the past. And so I think that that is leading people to, well, I have no other choice.
Yeah. And it's not like in the fast food and the grocery industry where they are implementing artificial intelligence. When we see all of the checkout counters where we check ourselves out now, because this is becoming prevalent. And people don't like this, but at the same time, they can't find a workforce. So what do? They set up a self checkout counter. So, Cheryl, what about you? Do you see people that even hire you that'll say, hey, just bring me a body, anybody. I'll take anything. Do you see that?
A lot of times, and their only qualification they're looking for is, are they breathing? So it gets almost funny sometimes because they just want somebody there that can do nothing, I guess. So I can't do it. As I go through the resumes, I've got to have some sort of something going on. But then again, some that I interviewed turn out to be just breathing, even though their resumes were good. They're just breathing, like the one I did the other day that was laying in bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you see all these different things. So desperation hiring, if you're doing that one, it's going to fall apart on you. You need to be aware. You got to have the right seed, which takes us to the next point, which is, where is the pond at that you're looking for these people? Are you looking in the same pond over and over again? And a lot of times, if we have people that are not performing well for us and we hire their friends, guess what? They're going to be just like the friends. So again, Cheryl, I'll go to you to start with here. Are we fishing in the right pond for people?
Well, everybody uses Indeed. That's a pond. We've started using a service that fishes in 10 to 15 ponds at a time, which seems to add a few bodies in there. But the thing about I like having my employees or their employees look for people if they're good employees. But because usually they'll find someone in the same work ethic that they're in. So that works good. But don't just bring somebody because they want a job. And we do this over and over. I wish it wasn't there. And I think it will change as time goes on, maybe. But at this point, until a lot of people grow up, and I'm going to use that word, I think we're where we're at.
Yeah. So Brandy, I'm going to go to you. And here's a situation for you. You were needing a personal assistant and you were very persistent to find the right person. And today you found that person in Denise, but that took persistence. Did you ever throw your hands up and say, hey, I'm just done. I'm ready to take the first warm body that walks in here and plops down in this chair in front of me?
I didn't do that, but I had just threw my hands up in the air and said, I guess I'm just going to have to do it all by myself. And because this is a waste of time. These people that are coming in and interviewing and these applications that I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask Cheryl though, was the bed blurred? Did he try to blur the background?
No, he's laying there in the bed. It wasn't a long interview in case you're interested. It didn't go anywhere. He was laying in the bed. You could tell he had no shirt on because the sheet would keep going down and he would pull the sheet up. And I asked a few questions and then I just ended with, let me give you a little bit of coaching advice. Don't interview while you're laying in the bed.
Because I feel like if you're not even smart enough, like fine, interview while you're in the bed, whatever, but be smart enough to like blur the background so we can see that you're in the bed.
Well, hey, it doesn't top the one that smoked the joint.
Yeah, true.
While she was interviewing him when she asked about the drug testing and criminal background. And so often if I walk upstairs where her office is, I'll overhear some of these. It's like, Lord of mercy, I'm listening to answers like, there's no way that person is going to qualify to move any further in the process.
And anybody that knows me knows my eyes give me away. So I'm going blind trying to hold my eyes in a correct position.
Correct. Now the next part is, and this is where I'm seeing people are admitting that we're part of the problem is in the interview process. Just recently, the three of us interviewed a prospective person for a company. And when you go through this, when you go through an interview with the three of us, which starts with Brandy, goes to Cheryl, then comes to me at the end, this is a pretty intensive interview. And at the end of it, when the three of us compare our notes, we may not have the same point of view on that person. So, getting this joint thing of upping the interview process. I know that some, Cheryl, that you're dealing with now have said, hey, you just go ahead and hire them, tell them they are when they're coming to work, and we'll take it from there where they know they're not good interviewers. What's your thoughts on this interview process?
Well, I'm not doing the higher, I'm doing what they call their beginning level, just somebody that can get in and they can train. We're doing a double interview once it goes into someone that's already been in the technical part of it. So, but I kind of like that because there's such a short window to hire anybody anymore. You leave that window open too long, somebody else has already hired them. And I have some clients that as soon as I send it to them, they turn the interview over and have theirs. Others put it there and assume that they'll be there when they get around to it. And so the good thing about hiring the ones right off the bat, you've got more of a chance of getting someone.
Got you covered. So moving rapidly when you get a good prospect, that's part of your process because you're seeing people are waiting, and by the time they get around to it, they done lost the prospect. Did I hear that correctly?
Many times we did. It happened to one this week, and they lost a real good CSR because they waited a little too long and she took another job.
Right. And Brandy, one of your processes is you have a lot of questions and you're actually grading this. Think of this being almost like a cooking contest or a barbecue contest or a beauty pageant where you're actually grading them on the various segments. Because when we get done with these joint interviews, you're sending us the grade of what you came up with. So how important is that interview process? What are we trying to find out in the interview?
Well, I want to make sure that when I'm interviewing candidates that I'm doing it equitably. So whatever questions I'm asking Sam, I'm asking Jane, I'm asking John, that I'm asking them the same questions so that I can hear the varying answers. And then, yes, I do give them a grade on each one as well, because that helps me determine if I'm deciding between two people as well, kind of where my head is at. But I do ask a lot of questions because remember, this is the only time you're going to get with them to know, is this going to be the right person for the company or not? And they'll laugh at me all day here because they know if the interview is really short, then the person's definitely, and I've had to extend them too. Sometimes I've had to sit there and I've got to make this interview go longer, but because I can't just keep them here for 2 minutes, but I don't know what else because I'm not going to hire them. But if it goes really long, sometimes I'm trying to I've either definitely decided or I'm trying to decide, I'm just on the fence. I'm not sure. But I think those interview questions, and I like to do behavioral interview questions where I actually give them situations and see how would they handle that situation? How can they prioritize those tasks that I'm giving them so that I know if they're going to be a good fit? And remember that it's not just a good fit on paper and it's not just a good fit in the interview. It's got to be a good fit for the rest of the team as well. So I could interview somebody that's excellent, but know right away they're not going to fit in with my team.
Right. Brandy, let me ask you this, and Cheryl, I'm coming to you next with this question. I see that the interview process often turns into selling the prospect on the company instead of seeing what this person's made out of. Instead, the interviewer is more intent on selling the company and the job to the applicant than they are finding out if the applicant is the right mix. So, Cheryl, you first. Do you see that an issue?
I do. I mean, that's why I asked a lot of the questions that my client should be asking, because they're wanting to sell their team. It's important that they tell them why they should come to work for them. I can't get, most of them don't do that, but some do. And if I can get them to let them sell them to the company, then the company, hopefully their website is covered enough, and their reviews and their interviews with their employees that the people have seen. I hope the people have already bought into the company before they come to the interview.
Yeah. Randy, what about you? Do you see that as a problem, that instead of doing an interview, we're actually doing a sales presentation on why come to work here?
I've seen that happen, certainly, especially in today's competitive market. When people do have a top candidate, especially if they know that they're looking for other jobs or they've had other job offers, then they're really trying to convince them this is why you need to come here. I find for me, I try not to push too hard. I like the ones, my best employees that have worked out have been the ones that have more interviewed me before I ever interviewed them. And they were really nervous and wanting to make sure that this was going to be a good fit for them, because then I know they're really serious about this. And so a lot of times too, when I'm not necessarily selling them, I'm trying to see again, is this going to work out for them? You know, we're a small company. A lot of people have never worked for a small husband and wife owned company. That's a whole different ballgame than the corporate world. We do laundry. We wash the guys' tarps. So if somebody says that they hate laundry or they're not willing to do laundry, they can be the best candidate, but they're not going to fit here. So I'm kind of trying to, we have dogs. If they're allergic to dogs, they're not going to fit here. So I'm kind of trying to assess again, if they're going to fit here for us. And then I hope that they have questions for me. That kind of also shuts me down too, is if I ask them if they have any questions and they're like, no, I think you've covered it. That's kind of a red flag for me. Like, you should have a ton of questions.
Yep, I understand, because you're investing, because this is where you're making a career choice to go somewhere. The next factor that's often missing, I think, is the failure to do the actual behavior assessment, what we call the DISC assessment, which that's one of Cheryl's things that's done, that points out the behavior patterns of, will this person be successful in the job that they're going into, their communication styles, how they need to be talked to, and how they're going to speak. And a lot of people don't engage this till later. I can remember cases of a client hiring an operations manager and then doing a DISC and having to tell them, hey, you're going to have a problem. This is a person that is not a self-starter. This is a person that you're going to have to push every single day. Those things are what you need to know coming in. So, Brandy, what's your thoughts on the assessment?
Well, you know, I'm a huge fan of the DISC. I just did an all-day training for a company on Wednesday, and that was one of my requirements, is that I wanted them to get a hold of Cheryl and do the DISC before I met with them, just so I kind of knew what I was up against that day, and also said that they could see each other's results, because I do think it's so important. And I always say, every time I look at my DISC, I'm like, how does this test know me so well? It's crazy. And I always have to give the disclaimer, like, look, I can't read into this. Cheryl's the DISC expert. I can just tell you what surface level, what it says. But in my office, we have one of every letter, which I think makes it really nice. I think if I had 4 high Ds, we'd probably kill each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would. So, Cheryl, and that's why 2 high Ds here are on 2 different levels in this building, because we would kill each other. So that's why she's up there, I'm down here. This is Jerry's space, that's Cheryl's space. So, Cheryl, you're the assessment expert. How important is assessing the behavior to see if the person will fit into the position?
I think it's extremely important, because people say things a lot of times, and I can tell you anything and hopefully you'll believe it. But when it's in black and white, and you can actually see where these people are coming from, no, it goes 2 ways. They can see themselves, things in their own selves that they don't like. You've changed. I've changed. Brandy's changed because of the DISC. And so I think it's one of the most important things we do, because behavior is a huge part of it, and communication is even far more huge than that.
Right.
And Jerry, can I just add to what Cheryl just said too? I think it's also important, if you're going to ever promote from within. So anytime I've promoted within, I've always gone to Cheryl to look at their DISC to see, is this going to be the right position for them? Because not everybody is cut out for a management position.
Yeah. So, and that's where you've got to be in this situation right there. So then the next is, one of the processes that we have taught, and we've done classes on this, is that the first day at work is the most important day in this new person's career. And that is because of the onboarding process that Brandy brings to the table here, and she's talked about a lot. So, Brandy, I'm going to start with you here, because the onboarding is an area of your expertise. So how important for success is this onboarding?
the worst thing that could happen is you bring somebody in and you throw them on a truck or you throw them at a desk with a phone. The second worst thing is you have an onboarding process set up, but it's so chaotic that day that you're just here, there, and everywhere, and you just look like a hot mess. That's their impression of the company. That's their first impression. We talk about the director of first impressions all the time. And so we need to have a system in place, and we need to have a calendar that outlines exactly how they're onboarded, what they're doing each day. It also helps make sure we don't miss anything. I mean, I need checklists to make sure I don't miss important forms that I need them to fill out, or important health insurance information that I need to go over with them. I need them to start on Chimneys 101 because a lot of the people I hire have never even had a chimney or fireplace in their house. So they don't know any of that verbiage.
Yeah. And that's where we often say they're lost, because the vocabulary of what you're using, and one of the things that we've learned is that many people are scared to hold up their hand and say, I don't understand that. So during this process, you're going over all the rules, all the regulations. They know what your sick leave is. They know your policies, what to do in the snow, the everything else. And this also comes up later if you have to write a performance improvement plan where you have gone through this and list these things that you went over. And these are the reoccurring issues. And Brandy, we actually just had this conversation with the client yesterday that is preparing a performance improvement plan, or what's called short a PIP plan, for doing that. So Cheryl, what's your thought on the onboarding? Are we right here with the onboarding?
You're extremely right. I mean, I can fish them out of the pond, but if somebody can't onboard them correctly, all they're doing is filling them full of trash and throwing them back. So the onboarding is kind of like when you're raising a child. You raise them when they're young. You teach them their ethics. You teach them what they need to do. I mean, we're teaching business, yes, but we give the little ones a skill of this is what we do, when and where. And that's actually what you're doing on the onboarding. You're teaching them as if you were teaching a child. Not that they are children, but that's the learning time for them. That's the time that they're indoctrinated into your company. And if you don't do it, they're just another person there, and they know they have no reason to stay. They can go somewhere else where they can be just another person.
Correct.
And Jerry, if I could piggyback again on what Cheryl said too, we started this conversation, this podcast, with it was going to be about employees not meeting expectations. But what we often find is those expectations were never set out. Maybe you had them in your head, but you never told them to the employee. And so that first day in onboarding is the best time to go over what are all those expectations. Just like you brought up, like, if you're going to be late, if you're going to be sick. So I think, honestly, when the employees aren't meeting the expectations, it's because either we haven't set out the expectations and made them clear, or we haven't held them accountable to the expectations.
Dead on the money. And that goes down to the next part of this. We expect so often that people are going to learn everything by osmosis. In other words, I guess they're figuring there's this brain transfer. But what I want you to think about, if you're listening to us right now, how much information is between your ears? How much information is between your ears of how your people are supposed to do things? And this is part of the process of building the systems. And in our process, we see there are 3 ways to build the system. Number 1, get your butt down and write the systems. But the problem is nobody ever seems to get it done. They just don't happen. Number 2, we got a really good friend, Al Levy. He has done a templated set of systems, but it's going to require you to modify them and also improve on them and add your customization into them. Or the third process is we actually have a consultant that we can send into the company and visit with the company, and then they can construct the SOPs. And primarily that's going to get working with us to put this together, and then we roll them out to the company. So Brandy, you first. How important are these systems of operations?
I mean, they're the guidebook, right? They're the manual. Just like you have an instruction manual for your dishwasher or your refrigerator, the SOPs are your instruction manual for how things need to go each day.
Yeah. So that's part of it. So Cheryl, what's your thought on systems? And let's give an example here. There was a time some years ago, Cheryl, that we had to reinvent your manufacturing plant. And we had everything systematized, and we were up and running in less than 24 hours with a completely new workforce because of these systems. So what's your thought on the need for the systems?
You don't, they're super, because there would have been no way I could have took a full manufacturing plant, switched out all employees, actually one stayed. I had one employee left out of the whole crew. 24 hours later, we were rocking and rolling. It was a little bit slower startup, but it started up. All we had to do, we didn't have to explain everything to everybody. If they could read, which if they didn't, they wouldn't have had a job. They could do anything in there. And I still use those today. The book's about this thick now, and it just keeps growing.
Yeah. And if you go back, so you'll know right here beside me, going back to the paper days, if you'll notice, this is an SOP book. Back before we had digital capabilities, everything was in a notebook.
And I still like keeping them in a notebook. I like the digital ones also, but I've got a trail when I'm doing the old ones. I like seeing the old ones because, as we all know, history tends to repeat itself. And a lot of times, to go back in the history of the SOP, there's things you missed.
Yes, they are, very much so. And be honest with you, just this week I was doing research and I was looking for 2003, 2006 NFPA 211s, and they got damaged in a flood. Okay. But still, I'm more of a paper guy. In fact, the guy asked me this week, I sent him a picture of a page. He said, "Was that out of an actual book?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, weren't you scared you were going to get a paper cut?" No, I have a background in the printing business, so I don't get many paper cuts because I know how to handle paper. But you got to have this there. The next is, how you going to train them? You know, even if you have someone come from another company doing the same thing, there's going to be a matter of retraining. So what is your training system? Brandy said it a while ago. Part of what she's doing a full day training with a brand new CSR. This is being done remotely, but there's only so much you can cover in that 8-hour day, Brandy. So part of this is they go into Chimneys 101, they go into the other online courses. And folks, I want you to listen carefully. She has trained people in other countries that are working remotely with companies in this country. I know of 2 of these that you've done at this point. Am I correct, Brandy?
Yeah, I have a third one coming up. I actually met with 2 of them this morning as well, because we do then follow-up sessions, 1-hour follow-up sessions, just to make sure that they're retaining what they've learned.
That's good. So how important is this training, in your opinion, Brandy, for this success? They've got to have this training. They can't learn it by osmosis. You agree?
I agree. And again, you spend so much money to find somebody and hire somebody. An incredible amount of money. We want them to be successful, but they can't be successful on their own. We had to teach, going back to like Cheryl's example earlier about kids and growing up, we had to teach our kids to walk. They couldn't learn that on their own. We have to teach them how to work for our companies. If not, again, we're just setting ourselves up for failure, and we're going to be frustrated because we think that they don't care or that they're quiet quitting or whatever the case may be, when really it's probably just that we haven't given them the tools that they need.
That's correct. Dead on the money. So Cheryl, your feeling on the need for training, if we're going to have people that are going to meet our expectations, how important is not only the beginning training, but the ongoing continuous training to perfect their craft?
That was where I was taking it. You've got to train them to begin with. You've got to give them all the tools to work with. And I don't mean manual tools, I mean mental tools. You've got to give them all those to work with. But if you stop right there, that's where they stop. But as we all of us believe in continual training, and you're never completely smart. I'm not a young person. And if I don't learn at least something new every day, it totally surprises me.
Right, because probably more than anyone that may be listening this, I would say that the three of us probably go through more ongoing training than the majority of the people that we work for and work with to learn more. We're reading books, we're reading, every time I turn around, Brandy is forwarding us out an article online, or I'm doing it. It's like, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that. So that's part of it. Then the next step of this is one everybody has an issue with, and I don't know why. And that is one of accountability. You can have all the systems in the world, you can have the best training in the world. But if you're not holding your people accountable, you're going to have a problem. And this is one of the things many millennials under 40, they thrive on accountability. Without accountability, they just can't have it. It was really weird. One time I took a trip to visit with a client. The guy is having a problem. And I said, dude, what's going on here? You just seem to have a problem. And he told me, he said, Jerry, the problem is here, there's no accountability. I said, wait a minute, I'm going to clarify this. So that means you're not getting enough beatings. He said, yeah, I got to have beatings if I'm going to improve. And they actually started an accountability system. And guess what? That guy is now soaring with his output and his attitude. So Brandy, what about accountability? You're a person, for some reason, I just feel like Brandy Biswell is a pain in the ass holding her people accountable. Would I be right or wrong?
And my teenagers, I would say. And my husband, I guess. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. Wait a minute. We might be failing there when you said one of those, okay?
I believe in accountability. And you brought up a really good point, Jerry. I'm always shocked when I'm working with clients. Sometimes I have to give really tough feedback. And I'm always shocked at how receptive this younger generation is. And they will tell me, thank you. What else can I do? They'll ask me, what else can I be doing? They want to be held accountable. They want that feedback. They want to do a good job. They want to be told they're doing a good job. And if they're not, they want to know how they can improve. And I'm always surprised by that, because I feel more like my generation, we maybe just wanted to sweep it under the rug and not be held accountable as much. We didn't want to hear about it. We just wanted to do our job. But this younger generation, they need that. And we as the employers need that, because otherwise, what's the point? If I tell my teenager that they have a midnight curfew, but I'm not checking to make sure they're in by midnight, so they know that I'm not checking, I'm not holding them accountable, then they think, well, she probably doesn't really care if I'm in at midnight or not, so I'll come in at 1 or 2.
Yeah. Cheryl, accountability. What's your thoughts on here?
I think there's a lot of reasons that people aren't getting held accountable. One of them, the employer's not looking. They're not paying attention to whether they're doing it or not. Number 2, once they realize they're doing it, they're afraid to talk to them. They're afraid they're going to upset them. They're afraid they're going to cause them to leave. Or either they're in the handcuffs. And the thing about it is, if you can't talk to someone, you can't hold them accountable, because that's what it takes. You've got to be able to have that communication so they can talk back with you. And as Brandy just said, ask you what else they can do. Because if you don't let them know they're not doing correctly, how are they going to know?
Yeah. And then the next one is, and you ladies hate it when I say this word, I know it right now, you got to nip the problems. Whenever the problems occur, and this is what so many people do, they let it build up. And I mean, it builds up to when it becomes an explosion. It's too far gone. You can't solve it. And I've seen this happen where people, they let it go and they let it go. They tell us about it and we try to tell them, you've got to take action. We tell them the steps to follow. But one day it will blow up. And usually when it blows up, it's going to be a problem. You see, there's something you need to remember. If you're going to terminate a person in your company, when you terminate them, they should be expecting it. If they're not, if they go into a crying fit and everything else, like, oh my God, I never dreamed, you didn't do your job. You did not hold them accountable, and you didn't nip the problems before it became severe. So Cheryl, I know you hate it when I say that word, nip it in the bud, that phrase, but what's your thoughts on that thought process?
You have to, because the thing is, it's not going to improve. And if, number one, back to the accountability, if you don't hold them accountable, it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse. And it's going to get worse. And one day you're going to blow up, like you say, and that they don't have any idea. Nobody in my business, the ones that I work with, they know they're going to get fired. In fact, I have had them come to me and say, "You're thinking about firing me, aren't you?" And because I've tried to help them every way you can go. And that's what we need to do. You try. The thing we don't do a lot of times, we don't try to salvage an employee. And if they're salvageable, it's a lot of money you'll save if you can do it. But if not, you need to get rid of them, because the bad apple is going to ruin the rest of the barrel if you don't get it out.
Gotcha. Randy, what's your feeling on you got to stop it before it becomes a major crisis?
Well, I think when I talk to an employer about responding to a negative Google review, I always tell them, you're not responding to that person that wrote the review. They're done with. They're already gone. You're responding to all the people, your potential customers that are going to come behind them and read that. When you terminate an employee or put an employee on probation, notice, whatever, you're not doing it as much for them as you're doing it for the rest of the team. Because what happens is, if you allow that behavior to go on and you don't nip it in the bud, it drags down the rest of the team, and they think, well, why is Jane getting away with all of this and we can't? And they will become disgruntled and leave. And then you lose your great people. And then you're just stuck with the people that you thought you were too afraid to fire, or you thought you were too busy to lose them. And so you thought, I'll just make it through with them.
Yeah. So here's an idea, if you're listening to me. And this is one that I've suggested to people. In fact, I was having a client conversation this morning, and this is a process. You need to create a file. And this file becomes a diary. And what you're doing in this file, you're tracking when things are going wrong. Tracking and measuring is critical. But just like today is November the 18th, something went wrong. It's like I said, I had a discussion with another client. And Brandy, this is kind of minor, but they were at a job site. They needed a cotter key, okay? Simple little fastener. Lost an hour going to get the cotter key. And my question was, why do we not have an assortment of hardware that includes cotter keys on the truck? Because I found out this was not unusual. And he even admitted, Jerry, we're tracking this, but the problem is we're not doing anything with the data. Yeah, I know. I can watch your waste reports and I see the problem reoccur. So that's one of my suggestions is create a record, a diary created on every employee that you have. And when you have a problem, you need to be noting it there. When did it happen? What were the circumstances and what did you do about it? Because this is the problem. People remember the last bad thing that they encountered. Right now, you can probably recall what happened this morning that was wrong a lot better than you can what happened on Monday morning of this week, because life has gone on. Randy, you got any suggestions for people to get a handle on this?
No, I 100% agree. My huge number one thing is documentation. And part of it gets back into perception versus the data. So I might have Jane over here who I think she's only called in sick 3 times, but I'm frustrated with it. But when I go and I actually look at the data, she's actually called in sick 5 times. I had forgotten about the other 2, but I have them there in my diary, as you call it, all documented. Or vice versa. I might feel like she's called in 8 times, but when I go and look at the data, that was me making that up. She's only called in 4 times. So that documentation is critical for that. But going back to the cotter key, how I look at that is that should never happen again. Right when it happens, you fix it. Don't, yes, it's great to report it, but you fix it right there in the moment. So that should never happen again. It's okay. It happened once, but it's never going to happen in the future.
That's it. And that's where you got to take the action. You got to track it, measure it. And that's the goal. If something goes wrong one time, that's human error. If it goes wrong again, then that's a management error. We haven't taken the steps of leadership that we should. Okay. Cheryl, what's your opinion? Any ideas you have on this?
Well, things happen, but as you say, they need not happen again. it's not worth it. We all have things that go wrong. It's like, in fact, I just told a client this morning, we were talking about SOPs and writing them. And I said, as soon as something goes wrong, there needs to be an SOP written to make it right. And that's how we get our SOPs. But that everything needs to be handled at the time of conception instead of waiting down, because I mean, you forget, it passes by, it becomes unimportant.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you've also got to list is what are the SOPs that your business needs to be adding? Because this is an ongoing list. New stuff is going to come on. Whenever I wrote my book, Standardizing Standard Operating Procedures, the whole concept is this is a never ending task. And what I so often see is I see people that get started, they may assemble a library, they don't hold accountability, they don't review what's there, and they don't bring it up to present day standards of what they need. And in the process, what's happening is they're going through continued frustration and change. And if you ever follow me, that's the whole process of Chucky, my groundhog, to remind people if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, that's kind of called insanity in this world. Okay. So, Brandy, anything you want to say before we end today's episode?
I think just reach out to us if you're struggling with any of this. These are really things that we deal with on a daily basis and are subject matter experts in. So reach out to us. I'll go ahead and put in a plug as well that I have a class coming up here in Kansas City in January for office managers, where we're going to teach them a lot of these skills so that the business owner isn't the only one doing this.
That's it. And that's where they're going to be able to delegate many of these duties down to someone else. So highly look at this because Brandy has a lot of good stuff rolling out of this learning loft there in Kansas City. We're really proud of what she's done. It's a completely remodeled area. It's got a very historic look to it. And I think you'll be very pleased when you come in there. So Cheryl, what about you? Any last thoughts from you?
I agree with Brandy. If you've got a problem, let us know. I would at this point almost say that it's nothing we've not heard before. Every now and then you'll get a new one slip in, but if we can just help you get over that hurdle and show you the path, you can get right back on it. Sometimes it takes a 5-minute conversation and brings your whole world back into play.